The plane's engines hummed quietly as it soared high above the clouds, the sun casting a golden hue over the cabin. Passengers were settled, the atmosphere serene, as the flight from New York to Lagos seemed like any other. There was a quiet comfort in the routine of it all, the flight attendants doing their rounds, passengers scrolling through screens or sipping drinks, and the occasional hum of conversation. Aiden, a young boy with dark skin and a quiet demeanor, sat next to his elderly grandfather. His eyes were fixed on the view outside, unaware of the looks they were receiving. His grandfather, though old, carried an air of quiet authority. They seemed like any other pair of travelers, yet something was off. Jennifer, the flight attendant, passed by their row, her gaze lingering just a little too long on them. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but she didn't miss the old man's worn-out suit and the boy's simple attire. No one could have predicted what would happen next, but that brief glance was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would unravel slowly over the course of the flight. Jennifer couldn't stop her eyes from flicking back to Aiden and his grandfather. They didn't look like they belonged in the first-class section, not with their clothes, not with their demeanor. There was something out of place. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something about the boy seemed too calm, too composed. She frowned as she continued her rounds. As the minutes passed, Jennifer kept stealing glances at them, a small, almost imperceptible sense of disdain building inside her. She had worked on this flight for years and had seen all sorts of passengers, rich ones, famous ones, but something about this pair made her uncomfortable. She couldn't explain it, but she was certain they didn't belong here. Still, the tension remained unspoken, just a faint undercurrent in the otherwise peaceful cabin. But it wouldn't stay that way for long. Jennifer approached Aiden's row as part of her usual service round, clipboard in hand, professional smile on her face. Yet, something in the air felt different. Her gaze hardened for a moment as she looked at their seating arrangements. "Excuse me," Jennifer said, her voice sharp and authoritative. "You're in the wrong seats. These are reserved for premium passengers." Aiden looked up at her, confusion on his young face. "But we have our tickets. These are our seats." Jennifer barely glanced at the tickets, her eyes focused instead on their clothes. Aiden's simple t-shirt, his grandfather's suit that looked just a little too old for the luxury setting. "I'm afraid these seats are for people who are more suited for first class," she said coldly. The words stung, but Aiden didn't react, not yet. His grandfather remained silent, his eyes cold but not angry. Jennifer turned, dismissing them as if the matter were settled. But as she walked away, something inside Aiden tightened. This wasn't the first time he had felt judged, but it was the first time he'd ever felt it so openly, so brazenly. No one could have predicted how her next words would shatter the fragile calm. Minutes passed, but Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She returned to Aiden's row a short while later. This time, her expression was colder, harder. "You know," she began, glancing at Aiden and his grandfather, "this isn't just about where you're sitting." Aiden looked up, his confusion turning into curiosity. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady. Jennifer's eyes flicked over him and then to his grandfather. "It's about how you dress, how you present yourselves. It's not just an airline policy. It's about who we allow in these seats." Her voice dropped just low enough for only them to hear. "I'm sure you didn't realize, but you're not the kind of people who get this kind of treatment." Her words were quiet, but venomous. Aiden's face reddened, but he didn't speak. His grandfather's expression darkened, but he stayed silent as well. No one could have predicted how this exchange would set off a chain of events. But in that moment, the air felt charged, thick with an unspoken tension. Something was about to change, something big. Jennifer, sensing she had put them in their place, walked away again. She thought the matter was settled, but there was something about the way Aiden sat back down, his eyes fixed on the horizon, that bothered her. It was as if the boy had been trained for moments like this, calm, unruffled, unafraid. But the silence between them grew unbearable. The other passengers shifted in their seats, glancing at the scene with mild discomfort. Aiden didn't say anything, neither did his grandfather. They were simply there, existing in the space, bearing the weight of Jennifer's unwarranted disdain. But as the minutes passed, the quiet grew heavier. Then, without warning, Jennifer's patience snapped. She walked up to Aiden's seat with purpose, her fingers clenching around the edge of his shirt. "You need to leave," she said, jerking at his collar. "You don't belong in first class." The passengers watched in silence. No one said a word. But in that moment, everyone on board could feel it. Something was about to shift. Aiden's hand gripped the edge of his seat. The room held its breath. Then, suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an important announcement. Please welcome the new owner of this airline, Aiden, and his grandfather, Mr. Oluwaseun." The cabin froze. Jennifer's blood ran cold. She looked around at the passengers, her heart pounding in her chest. Aiden, the boy she had ridiculed, the one she had believed was nothing more than a poor child. He was the new owner. The announcement continued. "We are proud to have Mr. Oluwaseun and his family take control of our airline. Thank you for your loyalty." Jennifer's world seemed to tilt. Her breath caught in her throat. The boy she had so easily dismissed was now her boss. The realization hit her like a wave. No one could have predicted the truth. Not one person on this flight had any idea who Aiden truly was. Jennifer couldn't breathe. Her legs felt weak. She stood there, frozen, as the weight of her mistake hit her all at once. The entire cabin was silent. Aiden and his grandfather exchanged a look, their calm expressions betraying nothing. Aiden's voice broke the stillness. "Jennifer," he said softly, "you judged us, assumed we were beneath you. You treated us like we didn't belong here. You humiliated us for no reason." Jennifer's mouth opened, but no words came out. She had no defense. How could she? Aiden continued, his voice steady, but the words felt like a weight. "You assumed we were poor. You assumed our value based on our clothes." Jennifer's cheeks flushed with shame. She wanted to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. No one could have predicted how this moment would unfold. But here, in the tension of the quiet cabin, everything changed. "I'm sorry," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Aiden's eyes softened, but only slightly. "It's not about what we wear or how we look. It's about respect, Jennifer. Something you need to learn." The other passengers were silent, but the weight of their collective gaze was undeniable. Jennifer could feel every pair of eyes on her. The realization that she had been wrong was crushing. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Jennifer stood frozen, her face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and shame. The reality of what she had just done hit her like a wave. She had humiliated Aiden and his grandfather based on assumptions. Assumptions about their wealth, their place in society. Assumptions that turned out to be wrong. Aiden's voice broke through the tension. "You assumed we were poor. You judged us by what we wear. But you're wrong, Jennifer. You're not the first to do it, and you won't be the last." His words were calm, but they carried an undeniable weight, one that seemed to hang in the air, making the entire cabin feel smaller, more intimate. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was trapped, caught in the realization that she had been utterly and completely wrong. The passengers around her, who had been watching the scene unfold, remained silent. It was as though they, too, were waiting for something to happen. Aiden continued, his eyes steady but not unkind. "It's not about how you dress, Jennifer. It's about how you treat people. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." The words stung. Jennifer wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she knew she couldn't. How could she? There was no excuse for what she had done. The truth was simple. She had let her own biases cloud her judgment, and now she had to face the consequences. She swallowed hard, finally managing to speak. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have judged you. I was wrong. Aiden gave a small, understanding nod. It's okay. Just remember, respect is something we all deserve. As he spoke, Jennifer felt a shift, one that would stay with her forever. As the plane descended into Lagos, the weight of the day's events hung heavy in the air. Passengers whispered quietly, the usual buzz of conversation replaced by a subdued tension. Many glanced at Jennifer, the flight attendant who had been at the center of it all. The shock of the revelation had rippled through the cabin, and no one could seem to shake the memory of what had just happened. Jennifer stood at the back of the plane, her hands trembling slightly as she watched Aiden and his grandfather gather their belongings. They moved with a quiet confidence, unaffected by the drama that had unfolded just hours before. To Jennifer, it felt like everything had shifted in an instant. The passengers, too, watched the duo leave, their eyes lingering on them with newfound respect, something Jennifer had once thought was reserved only for people of a certain class. She had been wrong. So completely wrong. The intercom crackled one final time as the plane touched down. "Thank you for flying with us today, and welcome to Lagos," the voice echoed. But Jennifer wasn't listening. Her thoughts were consumed with the harsh lesson she had learned. She had judged Aiden based on his appearance, assuming he was no different from the countless other passengers she had dismissed. But now, in the most humbling way possible, she knew the truth. Aiden wasn't just any passenger. He was a reminder that we cannot judge worth by clothes or skin. As the plane finally stopped at the gate, Jennifer looked at the quiet, confident figure of Aiden and his grandfather one last time. She had learned something today, something she would never forget.